on the Animal Mind podcast, we have been doing the 10 list. We're going to change that now and forever into the future to the 10 bullets.
Why are we doing that, Zach?
Why are we doing that? I don't know, Pat. I'm scared.
Because it's more masculine.
Because it's more masculine, ladies. No.
No, that is why we're doing it.
Yeah, that is why we're doing it. Yeah, all jokes aside, it is more masculine. And bears in mind with our Animal Mind podcast. And for our inaugural first ever and forever forward 10 bullets, we have Jose Garcia, and he is going to come on and tear it up. Jose, what's going on?
Thank you very much, Zach and Pat. A lot of pressure, especially for the inaugural 10 bullets, but I'll do my best. So my 10 essentially are 10 quotes that have essentially informed the way I think or look at life. And these are essentially things that at some point during the day will cross my mind to help me, work through the day. Stoicism has really influenced a lot of my life in order to be able to handle situations. And as we had mentioned in the previous episode, Kevin Smith also makes a special debut. So these are in no particular order of importance.
He's a modern Stoic.
He really is. He's a modern philosopher for sure.
Clerks was a real work of philosophy.
So I'll actually, again, in no particular order, I'll if I can jump right in, I'll start with the Kevin Smith quote that really has stuck with me. If any of my coworkers end up listening to this, they will be very familiar with this.
They better be listening to it. Supporting the brother.
It's a mouthful. Yeah, no joke. It is a mouthful, but I really, really like the meaning behind it. And the quote is, "Worry is just interest paid on a debt that never comes due." And this is something that I like to remind myself of if a situation is coming to head that I start to worry about. I remember and remind myself that worrying about it isn't going to help me. It's not going to actually do anything other than take up emotional capital. So I don't like to worry about things that I can't control. So essentially what I'm just doing is paying interest on something that doesn't matter because the debt never comes due.
Can you repeat the whole quote again?
Yeah, totally. Worry is just interest paid on a debt that never comes due.
Okay. Nice.
So like I said, it's kind of a mouthful, but I really, really like the meaning behind it.
So
number one was a killer right off the bat. I'm digging it.
Yeah, I like to so I'd piggyback on that. I like the quote. I don't know where I got this from, but worry is praying for something that you don't want to happen.
Interesting. I like that. Yeah, because you're again spending that emotional energy on it, but for no reason.
No, I just keep worrying I'm going to win the lottery. Oh. Sorry.
Awesome. I like it. Number two. What's number two?
Number two, Bruce Lee. Absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is essentially yours. So I really, and I tell people this again that I work with all the time as well, I really like the philosophy of Jeet Kune Do, which is essentially that, are you familiar with how kind of Jeet Kune Do came to be, the philosophy of it came to be?
No, tell us about it.
So, very much paraphrasing, but essentially, you had all of these martial arts that were saying they were the best, kind of like, oh, Aikido is the best, or Kung Fu is the best, or Jiu-Jitsu is the best, or Tai Chi is the best, whatever it happened to be. The thought with Bruce Lee was, well, they can't all be the best. Like, there's no possible way for them to all be the best. So he essentially created Jeet Kune Do, which was taking bits and pieces of everything that worked for him and getting rid of the things that didn't work for him. So I like to approach that with life. So like, what is the philosophy of Jose? Jose's philosophy is built on learning things from several people and throwing away what doesn't make sense to him. So, if there's something of Christianity that I really like, or like Zen Buddhism that I really like, I'll add that to my life. And I don't have to necessarily stick to Zen Buddhism as a whole. But if there's one part that speaks to me, that's the philosophy of Jose, and I add it to the rest of the things that make sense. So I add what's useful, reject what's useless, and then just add whatever is mine.
So I'd like to make a Bruce Lee book recommendation. Have you read Striking Thoughts?
No, I actually just picked it up and it's on my list next. So it's there. I'll get to it eventually.
Yeah, Striking Thoughts is a great book. I'm going to put a link in the show notes.
Okay.
And basically it's 10 bullet points, but it's 10,000 bullet points of just where his mindset is, and just super interesting. Definitely worth the read.
Nice.
Very
I'll
good.
Move it up on my list. So, number 3, kind of tying into, as I mentioned, learning from everybody. The quote is from Ralph Waldo Emerson. In my walks, every man I meet is my superior in some way, and in that I learn from him. So I like that because it reminds me that everyone around me knows something that I don't, or they're better at something than I am. So it keeps me grounded and humbled so that I don't ever think that I'm better than anybody, and I can learn something from them.
You know, that's a really uncommon virtue in today's society. People really aren't concerned of having a sense of humbleness or humility. And you know, I was talking to Chris since I've started the Animal Mind podcast. I kind of did the same thing with Zen when we did the Zen Disc Golf podcast, Zach and I. I'm not a big Twitter guy. I'm not a big Twitter person. And so I was trying to describe to Chris, because she just took over social media for a event planner. It's one of her new jobs. And of course I asked the question, well, why don't you take over ours? That's direct income. I mean, I don't understand. She said, well, I'm not doing a Twitter because I don't understand it. I think that people with a sense of humility, grew up with this, like, traditional values, like humility and humbleness, have a hard time grasping Twitter, because I use Twitter, so I'm not trying to put down anybody who uses Twitter. And as a matter of fact, shoot us a tweet, send us a comment. Anyway, but a lot of the reason that Twitter is so popular amongst the young people today is because everybody thinks that they have something important to say about everything, and that's where it gets dropped. So you kind of throw that sense of, and they think everybody should know it. So that sense of humbleness and humility is kind of come to fruition on social media as well. And I get, Instagram's not any better. We're taking, I mean, that's that's Twitter plus vanity, right?
Right.
Ron White had a really good quote, and I think it applies to a lot of young kids. If you have a thought, just let it go.
That's hilarious.
Don't do a podcast on it.
Yeah. I don't use Twitter because I'm like, nobody wants to hear what I have to say. Like, I don't know anything about anything. I'm just trying to learn stuff. So it's funny you mentioned that.
Yeah, I have a hard time trying to figure out what to tweet myself. And so basically it just drops everything from every other social media. And then I try to form relationships on there. But the only way to formulate relationships is to follow some people and then read their tweets and have something to say about them. And, you sit back and go, I don't know this person. Why would they care what I have to say? But that's where the filter is. That's where the Twitter filter is. Like, for us people who are like, have a hard time understanding Twitter, is because we actually have that thought, why would anybody care about this comment? But the people who are really great at Twitter and forming relationships, they don't care if anybody cares. They've got something important to say, and daggone it, everybody's going to know. And that's Twitter in a nutshell. Anyway, moving on.
So it's funny because that takes me to my I guess fourth one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
I knew that would be a good segue for you.
Perfect segue. Well, so it's funny because it kind of ties in the humility part. I've been kind of mulling things over, and what we mentioned, in the last episode, the previous episode I was on, was about, I didn't see anybody like me online, and so I wanted to put myself out there to, one, hold myself accountable, but two, help anybody that might, be in that similar situation or could see themselves in me. So one of the things that I started doing was I just started writing down philosophical thoughts that made sense to me. And I was like, I'll write a book of just like digestible thoughts. Again, back to that, it's like, who am I? Nobody wants to read a book written by me. Like, it's just, doesn't matter. I'm not a philosopher. But this is one of the things that I wrote down, and it's really stuck with me. And I've mulled it over several times, reworded it, and I finally got it to a place where I like it. And it simply says, enter into every situation willing to be wrong. Mm-hmm. And that allows me to go into any conversation, any meeting at work, any confrontation, any sort of relationship, if I go in willing to be wrong, it lets me know that I don't have to be right. It's not that I'm going in defeated. It's just, hey, I might be wrong. And what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
So that's something I remind myself of every day as well.
So as far as your talk about writing a book, I just want to tell you, I met an author at a book signing once, and I asked him, I said, listen, why should I buy your book? And he said, I don't give a fuck if you buy my book. Been friends with him ever since.
So I was just getting ready to say, I think everybody has a book in them and everybody has a podcast in them. And believe it or not, you know, you're saying, well, who would want to read my book? What do I have to say? Who would want to read 2 books about disc golf?
Apparently a lot of people.
A lot of people. I am still selling them. And man, I couldn't have the lifestyle that I have today if it weren't for getting over that speed bump. That's how I know you said you listened to some of the older podcasts. That's how Zach and I met, and because we had a love for just playing disc golf and go out and throwing some discs. And a lot of things have changed since then. But yeah, we met at a book signing, and I wrote a couple books. My wife asked me, how many do you think you'll sell? I said, I'd be happy if I sold 10. Hell, 10 would be like amazing. And it's been 4 years, almost 4 years. And I still make at least a part-time income from just selling books with passive income. Nice. I never thought anybody would buy a book about disc golf. So everyone has a book in them. Everyone has a podcast. Maybe 2 or 3 or 4 podcasts. Who knows?
Good to know. Maybe that's the push I need, man. I'll keep writing these thoughts down as they come to me. Number 5. This is Friedrich Nietzsche. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. And again, just a daily reminder for me of, you know, why are you being more like Batman? You know, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And as long as I have my why in mind and it's staying true and that moral compass is pointing due north, whatever comes my way, I will work through because my why is important to me. So just a good reminder of that.
Well said.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of reminds me of the quote, and I can pull it out of a hat if I needed to, but the Viktor Frankl quote that Ayla said last time. You know,
I got it right here. That was the book I was showing you. Viktor Frankl. Man's
Search for Meaning.
Yeah. Yep.
Very good book. Very good book. I'll drop it in the show notes.
Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Here we go. 6, I think. Yeah. Number 6. It's a little long. It's a little 2-parter. It made more sense to me once I heard the first part because I had only heard the second part. So I'll read the whole thing. This is from Socrates. No man has the right to be an amateur in the matter of physical training. It is a shame for a man to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable of. And again, that's one of those things that I remind myself of every day when I don't want to get to the gym. And it's like, man, I'm really tired. I worked really hard yesterday. Again, I have the ability to be able to do these things, and it would be wasteful for me not to take the opportunity. So, old dude, very wise.
I wonder what Socrates' training program looked like.
Oiled up wrestling, I'm assuming.
A lot of olive oil.
Because he was basically, from what we understand and know about him, sort of like a homeless drifter that just went around bothering people.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I mean...
that kind of sounds like my life. I love it. And then I have a house, don't get me wrong, but I do just kind of ramble around Watertown and bother people. So.
And the funny thing about him is we really don't know much about him other than what Plato wrote about him. So it's very interesting. We don't really know what was Plato and what was actually Socrates. But I want to know what his, like, was his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu he was into?
CrossFit. CrossFit had to be.
He was a CrossFitter.
CrossFit for
First rule of CrossFit, tell everybody you do CrossFit.
I'll tell you one thing. Socrates did not kip on his pull-ups.
No kipping.
He was a dead hanger. I know it. Plato wrote it down.
Dead hang all the way, man. Doesn't count unless it's the dead hang. You might be familiar with the next one. It's a Miyamoto Musashi quote. Mm-hmm. You're probably familiar with it because of Jocko. Reading that book, reading Musashi was a labor of love. I do a lot of audiobooks, so when Jocko was like, read this, I was like, well, here comes the discipline. I got to plow through like 20 pages every day to get through this book. When I finally finished it, I was like, man, I'm a real adult. I read a book that's close to 1,000 pages. I was very stoked. And he's mentioned this, and it really struck me as well. If you know the way broadly, you will see it in all things. And it took me a while to really understand this. And the best explanation that I was able to find for myself, my interpretation was not just focus, but perception. So, if you're looking at a tree and you're looking at a leaf and you're focusing really intently on that leaf, you will understand the leaf, but you miss the tree and the rest of the leaves. And if you back up and look at the whole, you can take in the beauty and the structure of the tree and the leaves, and you really understand where that leaf is coming from. So whenever I'm studying something, I try to make sure I understand, the base and the history and the true meaning of the things, instead of just focusing or hyper-focusing on one thing. Again, back to the idea of I want to generalize, not specialize. Because that's for me. There's nothing wrong with either of them, but I want to generalize, not specialize.
Awesome. I like how you took that quote and you kind of made it yours as well. That's pretty cool. I do have to say that Zach and I were talking about Musashi long before Jocko had a podcast or anyone knew who he was.
Right.
I'm going to tell you, I think Jocko took it from us, and Pat's willing to fight him on it.
Yeah, I mean, basically Jocko's entire, his repertoire, he pulled from Zen and the Art of Disc Golf and the Zen Disc Golf podcast.
Had to be.
I mean, I said discipline. I was hashtagging discipline equals freedom long ago.
That's great.
Good.
Let's see. 5, 6, 7. Let's do it. Number 8. This is another Bruce Lee quote. I really like, and has really grown on me. The qualities of patience and profiting from one's mistakes are part of the discipline of Gung Fu. So the part that really speaks to me is the profiting from one's mistakes. You know this, Pat, this, Zach, this already, but I'll say it for posterity. Failing is a bad word to some people. And if you are not profiting from your mistakes, you are wasting valuable experience. If you fail at something, you have a lesson there that's in your own hand, in your experience. And if you aren't profiting from it, if you aren't learning from it, that's one of the biggest wastes I can imagine, because you had that experience firsthand. So now you know what doesn't work. And if all you do is look at it as a failure, that's a waste. What you should be looking at it is as a way as something that didn't work, or what can you take from it that did work and then adjust it to make it a little bit better. So that one really, again, daily reminds me, hey, if something doesn't work, it's fine. I just got to learn from it and see what I can take from it.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned this on one of our other podcasts, Zig Ziglar's kind of take on that failure is an event, not a person.
Totally.
And I always tell my crews when I first go to a fire station, like when I first take over command of a fire station, I tell them, look, I don't expect you to not make mistakes. We're all human. Of course, I don't want you or anybody else to die for your mistakes. What I do ask is that you learn from them and that we come back and we are able to debrief and discuss them so that they don't happen again. But, very often people beat themselves the hell up. And they stay in this state where they're not even functional anymore because they failed at something. And when you do take that wide perspective, which you were talking about in your last bullet point, it's dumb to just not make yourself not functional because of something that's probably pretty small.
Totally. Was it Isla that mentioned she gave an acronym for fail? It might have been her. Maybe it was someone else. It was like first attempt at something.
First attempt in learning.
Right. I was like, oh, it's amazing.
I think that was Adam.
Was it Adam?
I don't know.
Yeah, it was great. I really loved that. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. Again, I just don't like that people think that failing is a bad thing. If you're failing when you're executing, I can see why that's a bad thing. But during practice, and learning, that's the whole point. You're learning. So
hashtag failure equals freedom. First to drop it. First, you heard it here first, folks. Failure equals freedom. Hashtag.
I'll start using it. Mm. The next two are number 9 is Aristotle. A tragedy is the moment where the hero comes face to face with his true identity. And for me, it means, my interpretation of that is, for me, when I shouldn't say look in the mirror, but when you look in the mirror metaphorically, and, we know who we truly are. And if, you can, again, use Instagram, social media to post pictures, make yourself look good. Ultimately, we know who we are. And if we don't like that, we can change that. So, the tragedy is when you see that, and if it scares you, you need to change it, or you have the power to do something about it. So that's more for me personally, just to be like, hey, if at any point you don't like what's happening, you need to do something about it. Because the easiest way to do something is to do it.
I always try to look in the mirror philosophically and just ask myself, am I here?
Right. What is being?
No, I agree with what you're saying, and I think you really hit the nail on the head there.
I appreciate it.
So I'm reading this book currently. It's called Scary Close, and I'm almost done with it. It was recommended to me, and I started checking it out. Again, Audible audiobooks. It was pretty good. But it's an okay book, but one of the biggest things that I pulled out of it was he talks about drawing a picture, and you take draw a circle about the size maybe of a ping pong ball, and you write the word self inside of it. And that's us. That's the true us, right? Then we draw a larger, way larger circle around that circle, and we write the words shame in that circle. And this is all of the shame that's been programmed into us throughout our lives for various reasons, maybe in adulthood, maybe in childhood, but different reasons we might feel ashamed of ourselves. The shame kind of blocks who we are in our center. So what we end up doing is we draw another concentric circle around it, and we basically, this is our mask. This is how we try to present ourselves to the world. It's not truly us, but it covers up our shame. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was absolutely beautiful, and I am totally guilty of it. It's putting an image out there that may not be exactly you, but you're trying to cover something up. And so I don't know what the key is to let the actual real self out is, except for vulnerability.
Yeah. And you mentioned it previously. One of the things that I've personally tried to do and make sure that I'm doing is I want to also share my failures, because and it's easier for me, again, as we mentioned in the previous episode, last episode that I was on, I'm not already fit. So I don't get to just take the picture of me with my abs, hanging out in front of a mirror. I don't have abs. And when I squat, you can see my gut, like all these things. So I'm trying to make sure that there's as little mask as possible. And sometimes when I record a video, I'm like, all right, let's make sure I do it with my weak arm. Like always do like with my left arm, or at least do both so people can see that there's imbalances. So I'm trying as much as possible to, not swallow the pride, but swallow the shame, and just be like, hey, here's the inner, here's the self, here's the ball in the middle. I try. So,
and that takes guts. That takes balls. I got to say, most people would not be willing to do that, even if they were super fit.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, much appreciated. So, the last one is one that's really stuck with me the most, and it scares me to read it. Not out loud. It scares me. I never want this to be my truth. This is from Henry David Thoreau. Most men lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. It makes me think of people, humans really, that, they have, like you said, everyone has a book in them. And think of how many people go to the grave with that book still in them. I never want to, I don't want to live a life of quiet desperation, of yearning, where I'm like, oh, I wish I would have done this, or I wish I could do this. And I don't want to go to the grave with that song in my soul. I want to make sure I get it out. And so that one always really scares me, because it reminds me of, if I stop moving forward, I will go to the grave with the song in my soul.
And I don't know who said this, but I like to you just jogged my memory here with this. Somebody once said that every time they drive past a cemetery, they don't see a bunch of dead people. They don't see a bunch of tombstones. They just see wasted potential.
That's
It's heavy.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that ties in perfectly. So those are the 10 things that I remind myself of daily.
Ladies and gentlemen, 10 bullets.
Man, it's just like that last, like the first few bullets were like good. I mean, it's like, it's like a nice 5.56 round, pow, 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 and then all of a sudden with that last one, he's like 40 mic, boom, 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 boom. Just crushing you on that last one, dude. Now I got to try to sleep with that on my mind. Oh, I'm gonna be sitting in Captain Marvel going, like, man, Jose is trying to ruin my life, son.
Never
The cemetery thing about unfulfilled potential. Stop. I gotta drive by one every day to go to college. Now I'm be driving by
wasted potential. Every tombstone. Maybe not every tombstone, but 95% of them.
Right.
End it, man. End it so strong. Power move.
Well, once again, Jose, thanks for coming on the show, and we totally appreciate you. I'm a fan, and I'll keep watching you, and we want to have you on the show again.
Can't wait to talk to you again, Jose.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Pat. Really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it again.
All right, you have a good night, brother.
Likewise, have a great one.